The idea behind this is he now avoid this obvious. The avoid of the obvious beginning with the avoid of Avram Avinu, with the midah of Chesed, which was Holich v'Nesaya Negbam. He was traveling to the south. The idea of south has to do with Chesed, because the south, when facing Mizrach, south is on the right. Tzofim has to do with Gvura, because Tzofim is on the left. So when he was traveling to the south, that means he was going higher and higher in the middle of Chesed. Chesed is the idea of Ava, Ba'ifin Shal Ratzon V'Shuv. That was the traveling. The traveling was that it was in the way of love of Hashem. And the love of Hashem always has this. It's a traveling situation. It's not something that's constant in one level. In a similar vein, Yitzchak with Midas HaGvura, Yaakov and Midas HaTeferes. So each one had their avodah in the different spheres. So still in all, Haisa avodah Nilus B'Yoser, despite the fact that it was a very high and elevated avodah, still in all Kalmar Sha'avos Heinen Markav, like we said before, that the Avos, they were a divine chariot Hashem. This was all up to the level that a created being could reach, because that level is part of his root and his source. But Nevroim, when they do their own avodah, they cannot reach higher than their source. Like it's known, the proof from the wellspring that's called Ein Eitom, that from there came the water for the mikveh in the Beis HaMikdash, where the Kohen Gadol was Toivel, and Chazal calculate that since the mikveh was on a very high area in the Beis HaMikdash, so because of that, the mayon that fed that mikveh, which was called Ein Eitom, that wellspring that fed the mikveh, had to be 23 amas higher than the Harabayis. So the Harabayis was not actually built on the highest location, and with the water flow, since water cannot go higher than the slope, in a similar vein, that shows that it cannot reach higher than its root and its source, because just like water doesn't flow upwards, same thing, the Nevroim cannot reach higher than their source. Though when we're talking about the root and the source of the Avos, it's very elevated, it's very high. It's still something that's only the root and the source of a created being. To such a degree, even the way the source is above, it's the way the created beings and the emanated beings are found above, but they're still creations, they're still emanations of Hashem, they still have to do with Nevroim. For that reason, the avoid of the Avos was a spiritual avoid. That's why they say about the actions of the Avos that they were only a level of a scent. In comparison to our avodah is likened to the oil itself, the oil that gives off the pleasant scent, the perfumed oil, versus the scent that comes off of it. And then scent in general is something that the neshama derives pleasure from it, and not the body. That's a famous thing why when Shabbos ends, we smell besamim to please the neshama, because the neshama lost the neshama yeseda. But what's the idea that the avoid of the Avos have to do with the idea of scent, of smell? Hoysach Shuragam, part of the Gashmi, though the avoid of the others was connected also with physical matters. For example, the kindness of Avraham in inviting in guests. It was connected also with physical matters. It was physical items that they did. Where it says that Avram told Sarah, knead and make these cakes. Avram himself ran to the cattle. Is that by Yitzchak was the idea of digging wells. Gab Kipshutoy, Valderich Zebenegel, Lavoid Samaklis, the Yaakov, and so too concerning the avoid of Yaakov's sticks, staffs of Yaakov. I explained in Zohar that when Yaakov carved out on the sticks the different colors, the different designs, to be able to create by the animals children that were similar to those designs, etc. So he says, but the Zohar explains that the spiritual significance of those things, it was similar to the idea of tefillin. Though there was also the physical aspect of it. The primary thing was a spiritual avodah. Therefore, after they finished the avodah, the physical thing did not change. These sticks that Yaakov Avinu carved out, they remained simple sticks. They didn't have any kedusha to it. It's not like film that when you put on film, it's a davar kaddish. You have to treat it in a certain way. That it remained in its physical state like before. That itself is a proof. Even at the time when the Avis did do the avodah with it, each person according to their level, it wasn't such a way that it permeated to such a degree the physicality of the matter, because that's why there didn't remain anything later on. So it's not just about that later on there was nothing. It was even at the time, it was to a lesser degree that it permeated, and that's why the result was later on that it didn't retain any of the holiness. Therefore, after concluding the spiritual avodah that they did with digging the wells, with the sticks and so on, no change came about in the actual physicality of it, and at least not a primary and essential change. Second paragraph in the page, that's the novelty, uniqueness of Paul Matan Torah, fil gaba of his obvious that Matan Torah accomplished even in comparison to the avodah of the forefathers. Sha'oz nasa bitla gzeira, then the decree was nullified. Shal yoinim yardul mato v'tachtoinim yalul yoinim, that after Matan Torah, the ones above could ascend below, and the ones below can ascend above. That there's a primary change in the physical thing. How come? That's because the advantage that they're specifically found in the physical. That's also the connection of Matan Torah with the idea of prefacing we will do before we understand. So it's not just that it was prefacing in time. First this, then that. We will do it at 9 o'clock in the morning, and at 10 o'clock in the morning, we'll sit down and learn about it. Hagdama Bisman, it was prefacing in time, but also Begam B'mailos Havodah. The preface in time was also expressed, or also had the preface in the quality of the avodah. The fact that it preceded it means that it's higher than it. Hainu sha'maisa or ikir, that the action was primary. Not like it was in the times of the forefathers. Though there was also the idea of Gashmias, like we said before, by Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they did begashmias. The primary avodah wasn't the spiritual. The ilah pa'ula begashmias, as opposed to the effect in the physical, was only at the time that they did the avodah, and even at the time they didn't make a primary and essential change. In general, that's the idea. In general study of nishma v'nasa, that by the obvious it was the other way around. The nishma, the main thing is the nishma, meaning the main thing is the spiritual component of the mitzvah. The physical component of the mitzvah was not primary, not important enough by the others. But to such a degree is the Maisa primary at present after Matan Torah. When a person fulfills the mitzvah only in action, so then whatever the mitzvah had to accomplish was accomplished, as long as you did it. As opposed to if the person has in mind all the different intentions without the idea of action whatsoever. He doesn't affect whatsoever the idea of mitzvahs, despite the fact that he has all these unbelievable intentions at the time. Before Betanya, let's explain in Tanya. This is understood another concept. Since Matan Torah affected to reveal the advantage and the quality of the below, that the one that's down below should arise above, since it's something that's connected with the physical, so that it's applicable to every single Jewish man and woman. Top of page 8, because the physicality is applicable to everyone. Everyone can put on film, everyone can put a mezuzah on their door, etc., etc. Even someone whose spiritual avodah is a very low avodah, it's possible for them to do a physical action to such a degree that their spiritual avodah is so low that their spiritual avodah is called the physicality of the spiritual. So now that Rebbe Nois Gimel poses a question, we still need to understand how did the Yidden reach such a level that it could be by them the prefacing of we will do before we will understand. Like the Chazal expressed themselves, who revealed to my children this secret. In other words, it's the fact that Chazal call it a secret, that Nasa precedes Nishma, that Nasa is higher than Nishma, it means it's a very high level. So how did the Eden attain this? The explanation behind this is the goals through the prefacing, the introduction, the preceding of the exile in Mitzrayim, with difficult work, and with the mortar, with bricks, so they became refined and purified and clarified, etc. Until this secret was revealed by them. That was felt by them, the quality and the advantage of preceding and saying we will do before we'll understand. The taking precedence of action over understanding is something that is similar to what will take place by Matan Torah. So so they already experienced prior to Matan Torah something similar to what will be by Matan Torah. Kim Shazeh Atabo Gals Mitzrayim, since just now they came from Gals Mitzrayim, in Chedei Yuchel is Gals Etzlam Inyan Zeh Shnikra B'Shem Ros, for to be able to be revealed by them. This idea that's called a secret. Ka'amr Le'il, like we said before, Mi Gil Alabana Raza, who revealed to my children this secret, Hutzachlias Ha'inyan, the Kaf Aleim Hakigigis, had to be the idea that he bent over them the mountain like a barrel. What is, like the Rebbe explains, what is this idea that Hashem held the mountain over their heads? That means that there was a revelation from above. It's an inspiration that came from above. And this, holding the mountain over their heads, this revelation from above, was an empowerment. That should be the inspiration down below of proceeding Naisa before Nishma. Since this began with the inspiration from above, that he bent over them the mountain like a barrel, this is considered, like we said before, a big protest, a big challenge to the Torah. Then after, so therefore, afterwards, in the days of Achashverosh, they accepted it again. The idea behind this is through the actions of Torah mitzvahs throughout all the generations that followed Matan Torah. So eventually, after all those hundreds of years, in the generation of Mordechai Esther, they reached such a level, specifically in the time and situation of being servants of Achashverosh, in the exile that followed the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. The whole idea of the Golus, the whole idea of the time after the Beis Hamikdash is that there was no inspiration from above. Chazal say, Esther, what is the source in the Torah for Esther? Like it says, I will surely conceal my face. Meaning, this means from the perspective of what comes from above, it's a concealment within a concealment. And the Yidden were at that time in the lowest state and situation. Like it's explained in Madrash Chazal and in also Amar Chassidus at length. All the Yidden arose stood from the most minor to the greatest, but in an approach of self-sacrifice. From the young to the elderly, also little babies and women, they all stood b'yom echad. It says, so the Rebbe is being medayik in the word yom echad. Yom we know is a gilui, and the gilui that was meir was the echad of Hashem. It's shown by them the idea of echad down here in the world below. This didn't just take place during some auspicious times, special times on the calendar, during Yom Tov, or when they were inspired, or when Mordechai gathered them. For the duration of the entire decree, for almost an entire year, the Gzeira came out Pesach time, and the year prior, and they were meant to be killed in Adar. That's almost 11 months. Okay, so when exactly everybody heard the news, but it was most of a year that they were under threat. And still more, the Alter Rebbe said that there wasn't even a thought, an outside thought, meaning a thought that perhaps they should assimilate and give up their Yiddishkeit. They stood in a state situation of being Yehudim. The name Yehudi indicates denial in idolatry. Chazal say, whoever denies Avodah Zarah, it's as if he's admitting in the entire Torah, top of page 9, Nikra Yehudi. That's why he's called a Yehudi. That's the title of the name Yehudi. It doesn't just mean Yehudi, someone from Yehuda. Therefore, throughout the entire Megillah, Zman Mordechai Esther, which is the era of Mordechai Esther, Nikroim, Yidden are called Lo Yaakov or Yisrael. They're neither called Yaakov or Yisrael, Beis Yaakov or Bnei Yisrael, like we mentioned by Matan Torah. There's the house of Yaakov or the children of Yisrael. El B'Shem Yehudim Dafke. They're called specifically by Yehudim. Even though the Yidden over there in Golus were not just from Shevet Yehuda, but from all the Shvatim were there. Even though the Asar Shvatim went into exile earlier, but doesn't mean that there was no mix of other Shvatim amongst them. Beginning from what we say in the Megillah, that there was a Yehudi man, he was in Shushan Abira, his name was Mordechai, he was an Ish Yemini, meaning Shoyim Shevet Binyamin. So you see that even though that he was, his lineage was from Shevet Binyamin, he was called a Yehudi. Became, what does this indicate? Still in all, his advantage and quality was he was a Yehudi. Shepirushai Sar li Yehudim. He was the minister of Yehudim. He was the representative, the representation of what a Yehudi is. Ish Harabayis. That also means Ish Harabayis. What's mean Ish Harabayis? We say Ish. That means the ones in charge of the Harabayis. Like Rashi explains on the pasuk, Hashem is the man of war. What does that mean? Ish Milchama, Baal Milchama, a master of war. Baal Abayis, like a master, a sar, a minister and a master. Mordechai, Baal Abayis, the sar al inyan haydi Yehudi. That Mordechai was a balabas over the idea of being a Yehudi. Shezel. Shehanagasi Hoysa Ba'ofen Shebli Habit Alzeh Shekol Abd Melech Kairim Mishtachrim Goyim. The way he acted was that despite the fact that all the servants of the king of Achashverosh would kneel and bow down before Haman, Mordechai would not kneel and not bow down. We'll stop over here.